Morning, grade 10s. Today what we're going to be doing is going through the first step of what's required for your final culminating assignment. Now, this mark breakdown this year is going to be a little bit different than what we presented at the beginning of the year, just because of distance learning. So this project that you're going to be working on is going to be worth 15% of your final mark instead of the usual 30 that your final culminating's are worth, which means your term mark, so all of the work that you've done up until this point in class, is going to be worth the other 85%. Okay, so your final culminating assignment, the outline is also posted on Classroom along with the calendar. It is going to be broken down into different steps, and at different points of the process, you are going to be, or on different days, you're going to submit different portions of the assignment. So please make sure you've also taken a close look at that calendar and written down all the important days so you don't miss any of the submission points along the way. Okay, and this will be our final assignment that you're going to be submitting for grade 10 science this year. Okay, so what we're going to be doing to end off the year is doing a distance learning science fair project. So although we're away from school, what's really cool is we can still act like scientists and we can still do science. So believe it or not, it's really easy to do science in your backyard, your kitchen, or on your dining room table. And you can act like you were in the lab, like at school. It's just going to look a little different than it would if we were actually in school in our lab at our lab benches. Okay, so what we're going to practice all year, we've been learning how to act like scientists and think like scientists. So to the end this year, we're going to act like scientists and participate in a small science fair. So what are you guys going to be doing? We're going to be doing an experiment. So what's an experiment? Well, we've done a few already this year, but just as a reminder, this involves testing, collecting data, and forming conclusions. Okay, so you're going to be asking questions that you find interesting or something that you want to learn about, like what's the effect of adding different brands of soda or pop to plant growth? What type of paper towel brand that you may have access to at home is the most absorbent? Or what type of flour makes the best chocolate chip cookies? The type of question that you're going to ask is completely up to you. And you're going to be designing an experiment, doing some data collection, and presenting those conclusions before we end school this year. Okay? So what's really important is you can tell you're doing an experiment because you are actually testing something, maybe even several times if you have the time to do so, and changing a variable to see what happens. So you're actually going to be asking a question and finding a scientific way to come up with that conclusion. Just to remind you, one thing that we want to avoid is we're not asking you to make a model, a display, or some sort of collection. So these are really good types of ways of learning for different courses or in different situations. This may tell you something or explain to you how something works in the real world, but it's not actually testing anything or learning something new. You're just retelling information that someone else has already concluded. So, for example, when we think of science fairs, we think of people making paper mache volcanoes and making a model of a volcano or a model of the solar system, or a diagram or a collection of different types of dinosaurs. That's not you asking a question and coming up with an answer. That's you just collecting and presenting information. So what's going to be really important is you're going to be asking a question and doing an experiment to determine that answer versus just presenting information that was collected by someone else, another scientist somewhere in the world. So how are you guys actually going to be performing these experiments? Well, you're going to be using something called the scientific method. And we've been using this all year. This is a process by which scientists ask questions, make hypotheses, okay, and test for evidence to make conclusions. So it's an ongoing process by which we learn more and more and more, okay? So what we're going to do is this scientific method is an ongoing process. It's a loop, okay? So what you're going to start off with is you're going to be making some observations and thinking of an interesting question, okay? After doing some research, you're going to formulate a hypothesis, so a guess is what you think is going to happen. You're going to test some of your predictions. You're going to gather data. You may reject your hypothesis, retest something, depending on how much time or detail you want to go into, and then you're going to develop some general theories. Okay, so you're going to look at the world around you, figure out something that you want to question. Okay, you're going to make a guess. You're going to test that guess by making some observations, and then develop a theory based on the data you've presented. Okay, and we'll go through this step by step, and that's why this assignment is broken down into steps to help you get through this process really easily. Okay, so this first step of the assignment and this first video is going to help you go through step 1, which is choosing your actual category. Okay, so the first thing you're going to actually have to do is choose a category that you're interested in doing some more research about. So think back on this year and all the things we learned, and think about what's something that you may want to learn a little bit more about, or do a little bit more reading about, or a little more exploration about. Okay, so you may want to say, what's a subject we explored this year that you found interesting, and why did you find it more interesting? So the 4 main themes that we went through this year was chemistry. So we learned how chemicals react with other chemicals in predictable ways, and we learned about chemical reactions that can have a negative or positive impact on our world. Next, we learned about climate change. So we learned about how climate change affects living things and natural systems in a variety of ways, and that people have the responsibility to assess their impact on climate change. We learned about biology. So we learned about how plants and animals, including humans, are made of specialized cells, tissues, and organs, which are organized into systems. And we ended this year with our study of light and geometric optics. So we looked at how light has different characteristics and how properties of light can be manipulated with mirrors and lenses for a variety of uses. So if you have a general idea, like I really liked chemistry, or I really liked biology, or climate change, or optics, okay? Once you've narrowed it down a bit, there's a few places you might want to look for to help you choose a type of experiment you would like to do. So there's lots of different places you can find. So one example would be your textbook. Okay, so if you log on to your textbook, this out of the way. Okay, and you log in. What you'll notice is our textbook, actually, so you guys all are Tommy 10 text and your some number, okay? And your password is a capital T, OMMY, 10, TEXT, okay? Once you've picked a category, you may notice that your textbook actually has in it some experiments that you could modify, okay? Or I'm just going to allow flash here so I can see the textbook. There we go. You may want to modify or do something similar to. And a lot of those are in the middle of the textbook. A lot of them have green backgrounds, or even at the end of a chapter. So for example, let's say I'm interested in chemistry. If I go to the end of the chapter, like Unit B summary around here, okay. A lot of times these pages, some of these you won't be able to do at home, but some of them you may be able to do at home. So a lot of times these unit tasks at the end, and again, a lot of times they have these green backgrounds, may be a good place to start, okay? And even within the chapters itself, if you found a topic that you found really interesting, like you really liked acids and bases when we learned about those, you can go back and flip through those chapters and there will be little green pages, and you may be able to find a lab that you're interested in and you have that equipment at home, because a lot of these have more chemicals in it that you can find in your kitchen, like vinegar or baking soda. Okay. There's also a lot of other websites here that we've pulled together for you, which have good examples of experiments that often only require materials that you can find in your homes already, okay? With social distancing going on, we're not expecting you to go out and purchase a bunch of materials, okay? A lot of these experiments can be done just with stuff around your home. So you may want to pick one purposefully that you already have the ingredients at home, Okay, so there's an example here of how you may want to look at how sugar can react with different chemicals, and the types of supplies you would need would be things like sugar, baking soda, and sand. So those would be things that you don't have to go out to the store and buy. You can probably find them around your house. Okay, so lots of different websites here with lots of different experiments that you can explore through to also get an idea of something that may be fun or of interest to you. Okay, so there's plenty of these that you can find online. And like we said, this is a few places you can go. This by no means is an exhaustive list. So if there's a specific topic, you can go on a search engine and look for like an at-home experiment would be a good keyword to look for, or kitchen chemistry would be good keywords to look for. Okay. But there are some resources already to help you get a start of looking at the types of things you may want to do. Okay. One thing that's really important is when you are picking your topic to make sure it's something testable, okay? So a question that you're asking that you can come up with an answer to, okay? So the examples we gave in the intro were things like, which paper towel is the most absorbent? I can actually test how much each paper towel absorbs and measure that. That's something that's testable, okay? Or how adding soda to different plants help it grow. So if I have little pots and I add Coke to one and Sprite to one and root beer to another, and I can actually measure the change in growth, that would be something testable, okay, that I can actually get some data from. Remember that we don't want you to create a model or a display, okay? It's a testable experiment we're hoping you do, okay? Once you've picked a topic, you may want to the first task is describing it below. And if you're not sure if you've actually designed an experiment or created something like a model, email your teacher, okay? And they can go through with you and double check it with you before you do all your work. So step 1, what's going to need to be submitted on that very first due date? And all of the work that you need to be working on, or you need to do written answers for and submissions for, what we've done is we've made those always in blue, so it highlights to you, this is where I need to write. So on that very first due date, what you need to submit is your summary rough notes, okay? So the first question that you need to answer is my favorite category of science this year was the following. This is why I found it interesting, okay? So I want you to tell me what type of topics are you wanting to do your experiment in, and why have you decided that would be a fun thing to do, okay? And it says, I want to do an experiment involving the following. So instead of just saying I'm interested in chemistry, specifically what in chemistry do you want to test? Acids and bases? Do you want to test different types of matter? Do you want to test mixtures? Okay. And tell me why you're interested in learning about this. Okay. These are the first 2 questions that I need you to answer for me for step 1. Okay. So down at the bottom, last page, we will be going through the other steps. But keep in mind, you are going to be marked on these answers. So what your favorite category was and why, and what you want to do an experiment involving and why. Okay. So there's 2 possible marks. So I'm looking at, have you identified a category or an experiment appropriately, and have you given me a good reason why? Okay. So this should be answered in a paragraph or so. So not 1 or 2 sentences, at least a short paragraph to explain that thinking if you want to get full credit. For this first category. So these first 2 things are for step 1. Okay? So that's going to be your first task for this portion of the assignment. Okay? And make sure that you've checked the due date. It'll be written in the description below as well, and on the calendar posted on Google Classroom. Okay? So I hope you're all staying safe, staying at home, and staying healthy, and doing some fun science in the next week or so. Talk to you soon.